Okay, so get ready for this one, because today we're diving deep into something pretty unique, a screenplay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's for Chronicles of Beef II.
Wait, the movie?
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Okay.
It's already been made.
Huh, that's interesting.
And get this.
Okay.
They're actually working on part 3 as we speak.
Wow. So we're getting like an exclusive sneak peek.
Exactly, and it gets even weirder.
Weirder how?
This screenplay was only released to one place.
What, like some secret society of film buffs?
Haha, not quite. It was given to a podcast.
A podcast? Really?
Yeah, called Beef Tuah.
Never heard of it.
Me neither, and I can't find any obvious connection to the film.
Well, that's definitely intriguing. It adds a whole other layer to this whole thing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Like, why this podcast? What's the deal?
Especially since Beef Tuah, from what I've read, is known for all sorts of conspiracy theories and hidden truths.
Right. It makes you wonder if there's something more to this whole thing that meets the eye.
For sure. So for our listeners who haven't had the pleasure of seeing Chronicles of Beef.
The first one, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should give them a little background.
Definitely. So the main character is Beef.
Beef.
Yeah, his name is Beef.
Okay, I'm already intrigued.
He's a construction worker from Manchester, having a bit of a midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis, construction worker, sounds relatable.
And then, boom, he gets abducted by aliens.
The aliens. Okay, now this is getting good.
Right. And he manages to escape, using what the screenplay calls an Andrew Tate mentality.
Ooh, that's a whole other deep dive right there.
Yeah. We'll save that for another time.
Okay, so he escapes these aliens, and then what?
Well, he ends up stranded in the desert.
That's rough.
Yeah, and that's where he finds it.
Finds what?
The legendary Temple of Jalebi.
Ah, the Temple of Jalebi. Now things are starting to come together.
Yeah, this is where part 2 picks up.
Okay, and the screenplay doesn't skimp on the details, right?
Not at all. It describes this temple as breathtaking, almost otherworldly.
Like something out of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, a little bit like that.
Yeah.
And we're introduced to a new character, Vale.
Fail. What's his deal?
He seems to know how to get inside the temple.
But.
Well, there's a but. He needs Beef's help.
Interesting. Why? Does the screenplay tell us?
Not right away. It keeps us guessing for a bit, which I actually kind of like.
Yeah, a little mystery always keeps things interesting. And speaking of interesting, the way Vale's dialogue is presented is pretty unique.
Oh, how so?
The screenplay actually gives multiple options for his lines.
You mean like different versions of what he could say?
Exactly. It gives the actor choices in how to portray Vale's motivations and his relationship with Beef.
Wow, I've never seen that before. So the actor actually gets to decide what Vale says.
Yeah, it's a great example of how filmmaking is collaborative. Even small changes in dialogue can completely shift the dynamic between characters.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all works.
Yeah.
So they need to get into this temple, right?
Right.
And to do that, they need a key.
Of course, there's always a key.
And guess who has this key?
Don't tell me it's...
The village elder.
Okay, who's the village elder?
Tony Soprano.
Wait a minute, Tony Soprano. As in, from The Sopranos?
Yep, that
What?
Tony Soprano.
Now that's what I call a curveball.
And it gets even better.
Better how?
The screenplay specifies that they use the actual Sopranos intro music when they travel to the village.
Oh, come on. No way.
I'm serious. It's written right there in the screenplay.
That is wild. So we've got aliens, a mystical temple, and now we're throwing Tony Soprano into the mix.
And this is just the beginning.
I can't even imagine what happens next.
You're not going to believe this.
Yeah.
But the screenplay actually tells us that they use green screens for the scenes with Tony Soprano.
Green screens. Really? Why even mention that in the screenplay?
It's almost like the writer is deliberately breaking the fourth wall. You know, like they're inviting us behind the scenes.
It's like we're getting a glimpse of the movie magic before the special effects are added.
Exactly. So they finally meet Tony, and you're probably wondering if he just hands over the key.
I mean, it's Tony Soprano, right? He doesn't exactly strike me as the generous type.
You're right about that. Things get a little tense, an argument breaks out.
Yeah.
And then bam, Tony Soprano gets shot.
Shot. Like, killed.
It's a pretty bold move, right? I mean, we're talking about Tony Soprano here.
It definitely makes you wonder about Beef's character, doesn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, remember how he escaped those aliens using, let's say, unconventional tactics?
Yeah.
This shooting might reveal a darker side to him. A certain impulsiveness, maybe?
That's a good point. He's not exactly your typical hero, is he?
Exactly. And to make things even more complicated, Vale grabs the key as it falls from Tony's hand.
Ooh, sneaky.
Right. So, are our heroes really the good guys here? Are their actions justified?
The screenplay really makes you think about that, doesn't it?
It definitely throws some moral ambiguity into the mix. So they've got the key. They've, well, dealt with Tony Soprano, but I'm guessing their troubles are far from over.
Oh, you have no idea.
Well, let's hear it then. What happens next?
Buckle up, because things are about to get even crazier.
I'm ready.
Good, because we're just getting started. Okay, so they've got the key, but I bet things get even more complicated.
Oh yeah, things are just getting started. The next scene is this crazy escape.
From what?
Well, they're being chased by this angry mob.
Wait, hold on. Is this mob, like, connected to Tony Soprano?
It doesn't explicitly say, but it definitely plays into those classic mobster tropes. You can almost picture them in pinstripe suits and fedoras.
So we've got aliens, a mystical temple, and now mobsters? What is going on?
It's wild, right? It's like the writer took all these different genres and threw them in a blender.
And somehow it works.
It really does. It's a testament to the writer's creativity, that's for sure. So they managed to escape the mob.
But I'm guessing the temple itself isn't exactly a walk in the park.
You got it. They run into all sorts of traps.
Like what?
Arrows flying out of nowhere, pressure plates triggering who knows what.
Classic adventure movie stuff.
Right. But there's this one detail that really stood out to me.
What's that?
The screenplay actually specifies using Minecraft TNT noises for some of the pressure plates.
Minecraft. The video game.
Yep. You know that iconic boom sound? That's what they want for the traps.
It's like a weird little Easter egg.
It definitely makes you wonder what the filmmaker is going for with that choice.
Maybe it's a way of adding a touch of humor to the scene. Or maybe it's a subtle nod to the influence of video games on our culture.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, what does that sound evoke for the audience? Is it funny? Is it unsettling?
It definitely adds another layer to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So they make it through all the traps.
Eventually, yeah. And they finally reach the treasure chamber.
So they're home free, right? They get the treasure and live happily ever after.
Not quite.
Yeah.
There's one more obstacle standing in their way.
What, another trap?
Not exactly. This time it's a character. The screenplay calls him Carl, and he's described as an ogre.
An ogre. Like Shrek.
Well, the screenplay doesn't specify if he's green or anything, but you get the idea. He's big, he's mean, and he's guarding the treasure.
This is getting ridiculous.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Beef recognizes Carl.
Recognizes him. From where?
That's the big question. The screenplay doesn't tell us, but it does make you wonder if Carl is connected to the aliens from the first film.
Ooh, now that would be a twist.
It would, wouldn't it? And it would tie back to that whole Beef Tuah podcast conspiracy theory angle.
Okay, remind me. What was it about Beef II that was so strange?
Well, they've been hinting that the Chronicles of Beef might be more than just a fictional story.
You mean like based on real events?
That's what they seem to be implying. And when you consider the Minecraft noises, the mention of green screens, and now this mysterious ogre who might be an alien...
It does make you wonder if there's something deeper going on here.
Right, like maybe the screenplay is full of coded messages or something.
My mind is officially blown. So what happens with Carl? Does he fight Beef?
Actually, it's Vale who makes the next move.
What does he do?
He sacrifices himself to give Beef a chance to escape with the treasure.
He sacrifices himself. Why would he do that?
It's a pretty selfless act, especially considering Vale's not exactly known for his heroism.
Yeah, he seemed pretty rough around the edges.
But before he makes his final stand, he tells Beef, "Consider us even."
What does that even mean?
It's like he's finally settling some old score or making amends for something.
There's definitely a lot of history there that the screenplay isn't telling us.
Exactly. But anyway, Beef manages to escape with the treasure.
But I'm guessing the temple doesn't just let him walk away that easily.
You're right. As he's fleeing, the whole temple starts to collapse around him.
It's like it's trying to bury its secrets forever.
It's a classic destroy the evidence trope, but it could also be symbolic, right? Like Beef leaving his old life behind, literally burying the past.
That's a good point. And then, as Beef escapes the collapsing temple, we get this incredible visual.
Oh yeah. What is it?
A binary sunset.
You mean like two suns?
Yep. Just like in Star Wars.
Wow, that's a pretty epic image.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the screenplay describes this beautiful soundtrack playing as Beef watches the sun set. It's a moment of reflection, a pause before the next chapter of his journey begins.
But this isn't the end, right? There's still that whole post-credit scene.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I almost forgot about that. And it definitely adds another layer of intrigue to the whole story.
For sure. So what happens? Spill the beans.
Okay, so picture this. There's Tony Soprano wakes up from a coma.
He's alive.
Well, sort of. He's alive, but he's haunted by these nightmares.
Nightmares. About what?
About Beef.
Oh, wow. So even though Beef, shot him and left him for dead, their connection isn't over.
Not by a long shot. It's like their fates are intertwined somehow.
And it all ties back to that line from Vale, consider us even, like maybe Beef's actions have consequences that extend beyond the immediate events of the story.
It's a classic case of what goes around comes around. But there's one more detail from the screenplay that I want to touch on.
Okay, what is it?
It says that the treasure emanates a green light.
Green light. That's interesting. Didn't the Beef Tuah podcast mention something about the color green?
They did.
Yeah.
They pointed out that green is often associated with growth, transformation, and even otherworldly beings.
So maybe that green light is a sign that Beef is going through some kind of metamorphosis.
It's like he's shedding his old life and becoming something new, something connected to this mysterious green energy.
And that green light is guiding him towards his destiny.
It's a pretty powerful image, right?
It really is. It makes you wonder what's going to happen to Beef in part 3.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. Okay, so Beef shot Tony, and now Tony's in a coma and having nightmares about Beef.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild twist.
And it makes you wonder if maybe Beef is actually the bad guy in all this.
Well, the screenplay definitely plays with that idea, right? Like, is he a hero or an anti-hero?
It's hard to say for sure. But let's go back to that treasure for a second.
Oh, okay.
It's the treasure that ends up sucking Beef in, right?
Right at the very end, yeah. And the screenplay specifically mentions that it emanates a green light.
Green light. That's interesting. Didn't the Beef II podcast have some theories about the color green?
Oh, yeah, they did. They pointed out that green is often used to symbolize transformation or even otherworldly beings.
So maybe that green light is a sign that Beef is about to go through some kind of major change.
It's possible, right? Like maybe he's being transported to another dimension or something.
Or maybe it's a more internal transformation, like a spiritual awakening.
Yeah, it could be. And it all ties back to the collapse of the temple, right?
How so?
Well, it's like Beef is literally leaving his old life behind. The temple represents his past, and now it's crumbling into dust.
And he's emerging as something new, something connected to this mysterious green energy.
It's a pretty powerful image, isn't it?
It really is. And it leaves us with so many questions.
Like, what's going to happen to Beef in part 3? What's on the other side of that green light?
And what about Tony Soprano? Is he going to wake up from his coma and seek revenge?
And is there any truth to those Beef Tuah conspiracy theories?
I guess we'll have to wait and see. But in the meantime, I'm really impressed with how this screenplay manages to blend so many different genres together.
Yeah, it's got action, adventure, comedy, mystery, even a little bit of sci-fi.
And it's all tied together with this really unique tone and style.
It's definitely not your typical Hollywood blockbuster.
So if you're looking for something different, something that will challenge your expectations,
I highly recommend checking out Chronicles of Beef.
and keep an ear out for those Beef Tuah theories.
You never know what kind of rabbit holes you might find yourself going down.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the screenplay for Chronicles of Beef II.
Thanks for joining us.
And as always, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.